My name is Margaret Hale, and until that Friday night, I believed respect was something you earned once in life and kept forever. I was wrong. The restaurant smelled of roasted garlic and champagne. The chandeliers above us glittered like tiny suns. It was Andrew's birthday. My son and Vanessa, his wife, had invited me with the sweetest voice over the phone. "Don't bring anything, Mom," she'd said. "We'll take care of you tonight." I'd spent the afternoon ironing my best blouse, the one with small pearl buttons my late husband once said made me look elegant. I wanted to look proud, not needy. When I arrived, the table was already half full, friends from Andrew's office, people I didn't know. Laughter spilled like wine across the room, and I tried to fit in, even though I felt like a ghost in my own family. Vanessa barely looked at me when I sat down. Her phone was glued to her hand. Andrew kissed my cheek quickly, already distracted by the waiter pouring champagne. I smiled and tried to forget the awkwardness. I told myself it was fine. Families change. Maybe I was just out of step with their world. Then the dinner started. Lobster, steaks, bottles of wine I couldn't pronounce. Vanessa kept ordering, her voice loud and confident, as if the world belonged to her. I nibbled at a salad, thinking about the cost but saying nothing. I didn't want to embarrass my son on his birthday. When dessert came, Vanessa raised her glass and laughed. "Let's settle up, people." The waiter placed the long slip of paper at the center of the table, 7,538. For a second, I thought it was a joke. Vanessa pulled out a gold-colored credit card and waved it proudly. "On me," she said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. Everyone clapped. I felt a little warmth. Maybe I'd misjudged her. Maybe she was trying. Then, a few minutes later, the waiter came back, whispering something into her ear. Her smile stiffened. She looked at me across the table, her eyes narrowing, and then she said it, clear, cold, cutting through the noise. "Old lady, your turn. My card's maxed out. You can handle it, right?" For a moment, no one breathed. Even Andrew didn't look up from his phone. The laughter died somewhere between the clinking glasses. The waiter stared at me, waiting. I felt the blood drain from my face. Old lady. That's what she saw when she looked at me. Not a mother, not a woman who'd raised her husband, just an aging wallet in sensible shoes. I reached for my purse with trembling fingers. My hands weren't shaking from weakness. They were shaking from fury. I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk out. But every eye was on me. And pride, old, stubborn pride, made me stay seated. I handed over my debit card. The waiter returned a minute later, smiling politely. "Approved," he said. Vanessa clapped her hands once. "See? Everything works out." The table went back to laughter as if nothing had happened, but I sat there staring at the paper slip beside my empty plate, the ink already smudging from the sweat of my palms. $7,538. That number burned itself into my memory like a scar. On the ride home, the streetlights passed across the windshield in long, white stripes. Andrew didn't say a word. Vanessa hummed to the radio. I stared out the window, replaying every moment, every careless smile, every time she'd called me sweet old Maggie in that patronizing tone. Something inside me cracked open, a small, steady sound only I could hear. Maybe respect isn't something you keep forever after all. Maybe you have to defend it, even from your own family. That night, I placed the restaurant receipt on my kitchen table and sat staring at it until the dawn light touched the edge of the paper. I didn't know it yet, but that slip of paper was my invitation to a war I never wanted, but one I was born ready to fight. When I got home that night, I didn't turn on the lights. The kitchen was soaked in the dim blue of the street lamps outside. The restaurant receipt was still in my purse, folded and damp from my hands. I placed it on the table like evidence from a crime scene. The clock on the wall had stopped again, just like it always did when the batteries were low. I told myself I'd replace them in the morning, but something in that stillness felt too familiar, too heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath with me. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vanessa's face, her smirk, the way she called me old lady. My mind kept circling around that number, $7,538, until it became a drumbeat under my skin. By dawn, I'd made up my mind to check my accounts. Maybe it wasn't just the dinner that had gone wrong. The next morning, I went to the Blue Ridge Credit Union, where I'd kept my savings for decades. The same teller who'd helped me since my husband passed, Sophie, a kind girl with freckles and patient eyes, greeted me. "Morning, Mrs. Hale," she said. "What brings you in today?" "I'd like to see my account statements," I told her. My voice came out steadier than I felt. As she scrolled through the records, her smile faded. She turned the screen slightly toward me. "There have been several withdrawals this month, and 3 loan payments under your name." I frowned. "Loan payments? I don't have any loans." Sophie hesitated. "It looks like someone added an authorized user, Andrew Hale. Is that your son?" For a moment, the world tilted. My son. My own son. I nodded slowly, my throat dry. "Yes, but I never signed anything for that." She looked uncomfortable. "The signatures are on file, but if you think there's been a mistake, we can open a fraud claim." Her voice blurred after that. All I could hear was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the faint tapping of her nails on the keyboard. My husband, John, used to say trust is a house you build one brick at a time. I never realized it could burn down in a single morning. When I walked back outside, rain had started to fall. The sky was low and gray, and my old leather shoes soaked through in seconds. I stood there for a long time, feeling the cold water seep into my feet, and thought of every birthday I'd paid for, every favor I'd said yes to, every time I'd stayed quiet just to keep the peace. By the time I got home, anger had replaced disbelief. I opened my drawer of documents, birth certificates, pension letters, my husband's will, there at the bottom. I found a thin envelope from a mortgage company I didn't recognize. I tore it open. The letter congratulated me for successfully refinancing your property at 5.7%. My heart pounded. I never refinanced anything. I called Andrew. He answered on the second ring, sounding half asleep. "Mom, can this wait? Vanessa's not feeling great." "You used my name for loans, didn't you?" My voice was shaking now, a mix of rage and disbelief. "You and Vanessa signed things behind my back." He sighed, that impatient sound that had replaced tenderness years ago. "It's complicated, Mom. You said you wanted to help us. The house was just paperwork." "Paperwork," I whispered. "You took everything your father and I built." He went silent, then quietly, "You wouldn't understand. We're doing fine. Just don't make this a thing." And the line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, realizing that motherhood doesn't end when your child stops needing you. It ends when he starts using you. That evening, Sophie called from the bank. "Mrs. Hale," I checked further. "There are signatures that don't match. I shouldn't say this, but I think you should talk to a lawyer." I thanked her, though my voice was barely a whisper. After I hung up, I stared at the framed photo on the mantel, John in his uniform, smiling like he still believed the world was fair. I touched the glass. "You'd know what to do," I said, but he wasn't there, just me. An old woman with a drained account and a heart that couldn't decide whether to break or to fight. The next morning, I made a call to a name Sophie had given me, Helen Brooks, an attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. Her office was a tiny place near the courthouse, walls covered in degrees and framed newspaper clippings. She listened without interrupting, her pen scratching notes in neat, deliberate strokes. When I finished, she looked at me the way a doctor looks at an open wound. "Mrs. Hale," she said softly, "what your son and daughter-in-law did is fraud, but it's also personal. You're going to need strength for both kinds of battles." I took a deep breath. "Then I'd better start now." That night, as I placed the receipt from the restaurant next to the bank statements, I realized something had shifted. I was no longer just the woman who'd been humiliated over dinner. I was the woman who was going to make them answer for it. And somewhere deep inside me, the old clock on the wall ticked once, as if it had finally decided to start running again. It happened faster than I expected. 1 week after meeting with Helen, I woke up to the sound of knocking, heavy, official, the kind that doesn't wait for an answer. 2 police officers stood on my porch, hats dripping with rain. Behind them was a woman in a gray cardigan holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "I'm with Adult Protective Services. We received a report that you may be experiencing cognitive decline. We're here to make sure you're safe." My stomach turned cold. "From whom?" She didn't answer, just gave me a polite, trained smile. "We'd like to have a quick evaluation." Andrew and Vanessa stepped out from the car parked by the curb. They looked worried, too perfectly worried. Vanessa clutched her phone like a prop. "Mom," she said sweetly, "this is for your own good. You've been confused lately, remember? Confused." The word sliced through me. I wanted to scream, to tell them I wasn't crazy, but the more I argued, the more their sympathetic expressions hardened, as if I were proving their point. Within an hour, I was in the back of an ambulance, the rain turning to sleet outside. The place they took me to was called Greenwood Haven. The name sounded gentle, almost kind. Inside, it smelled like bleach and loneliness. They took my purse, my phone, even the photograph of John I kept in my wallet. For the first 2 days, I barely spoke. The nurses talked over me, not to me. Meals were pushed under a half-closed door. Every few hours, someone asked if I knew what day it was. When I answered correctly, they wrote something down anyway. On the 3rd night, I met Bea, my roommate, a small woman with silver hair that refused to stay pinned up. "Don't fight too hard," she whispered. "They mark you as combative, and then you don't get your pills on time." Her words scared me more than the locked doors. But I wasn't ready to surrender. If Helen was still working my case, I needed to reach her. When a young nurse came in to collect trays, I smiled and asked for a favor. "Could you get me a pen and paper? I want to write to my son." She hesitated, then slipped me a pen when no one was looking. That night, I wrote everything. Dates, names, how they'd brought me here. Bea found a small USB drive tucked under her mattress, a leftover from a volunteer who used to visit. "You want this?" she asked. "It still works." Over the next week, I recorded everything on it with the small digital recorder attached to the nurse's computer, a malfunctioning log device no one checked anymore, conversations about medication doses, the sound of locks, even the cries at night from the West Wing, during rounds. I slipped the USB into a box of supplies the delivery man carried out each morning. He was kind enough to nod when I whispered, "It's for Sophie." The waiting was torture. Every day. I wondered if it had worked. Every night. I heard whispers from other rooms, people forgotten by their families, their voices fading into the hum of fluorescent lights. Greenwood wasn't a haven. It was a warehouse for the unwanted. One morning, I woke to a commotion in the hallway. Clipboards clattered, voices rose. When the door opened, a man in a state inspector's badge stepped in with 2 uniformed officers. He glanced at my wristband, then looked at the nurse beside him. "She's one of the names on the report." I didn't know whose report he meant until I saw Sophie standing behind them, holding a folder. Her eyes met mine for a brief second, full of quiet fire. By noon, the atmosphere in the building had changed completely. Staff whispered, administrators shouted. They searched offices, opened cabinets. A police officer photographed the restraints drawer. That night, Bee squeezed my hand. "You did this," she said softly. "You got them to come." I wanted to believe her, but I didn't feel victorious, only numb. The next morning, 2 officials came to my room. "Mrs. Hale, you'll be leaving with us," one said gently. "You're not supposed to be here." The hallway smelled like rain again as they led me outside. For the first time in weeks, I felt real air on my face. Helen was waiting by her car. When she saw me, she hugged me without hesitation. "You're free," she said, voice trembling. "And they're about to learn what that means." I looked back at the gray building with its locked windows and whispered, "Not just me, all of them." Because freedom, I realized, isn't just walking out of a door. It's knowing you'll never let anyone lock it behind you again. The courthouse smelled like old paper and rain. I sat on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, clutching my coat even though it wasn't cold. Helen sat beside me, reviewing the documents one last time. "Stay calm," she whispered. "You don't need to prove anything. The evidence will speak." But it wasn't the court I was afraid of. It was seeing my son again. When the bailiff opened the doors, the sound of shuffling feet echoed like thunder. Andrew was already there, sitting beside Vanessa at the defendant's table. He looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders tense, his hair thinning at the temples. For a second, my heart softened. Then I saw the way Vanessa leaned in and whispered something in his ear, and the feeling disappeared. The judge entered, a tall woman with gray hair pulled into a bun. "Case number 14973, she said. "Hale versus Hale." The irony wasn't lost on me. Helen presented the evidence first, bank records, forged signatures, and the refinancing documents. The screen flickered as the clerk played a recording, Andrew's voice from a phone conversation, clear and cold. "Once she's declared incompetent, everything goes through me. We'll sell the house, pay off the loans, and move west." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Andrew's head dropped into his hands. Vanessa turned pale. Then Helen called Sophie to the stand. She spoke calmly about the withdrawals, the mismatched signatures, the day she realized what was happening. "Mrs. Hale never authorized any of it," she said. "Her son forged her name." When it was my turn, I stood, knees shaking but back straight. Helen had told me I didn't need to testify, but I wanted to. I needed to. "Mrs. Hale," the judge said, "you may speak." I looked at Andrew. My son, who used to climb trees and bring me dandelions as gifts. I searched his face for a trace of the boy I'd raised, but all I saw was a man who'd forgotten what love looks like. "I am not here because of money," I said slowly. "I'm here because I was erased. I was made invisible by the people who should have protected me." The courtroom was silent. I could feel every eye on me, but I wasn't speaking for them. I was speaking for the woman I used to be, the one who stayed quiet out of love and ended up being silenced. "I'm not crazy," I continued. I'm old. Yes, my hands shake. My memory slips sometimes. But I remember what trust feels like. I remember when my son used to call me Mom without rolling his eyes. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. And I remember signing nothing. Helen touched my arm gently. "That's enough," she whispered, but I shook my head. "I have one more thing," I said, pulling the folded restaurant receipt from my pocket. The ink was faint now, but the number was still there. It started with this: a dinner I didn't order, a bill I shouldn't have paid. That was the night I realized they no longer saw me as family, just a source. I placed the paper on the table between us. This is how it ends. When I sat down, Andrew looked up for the first time. His eyes were red. For a moment, I thought he might speak, but he just lowered his gaze again. After that, everything moved quickly. The judge reviewed the files, her face unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Mrs. Hale, you are found competent and of sound mind. Mr. and Mrs. Hale." She looked at them sternly. "You are guilty of financial exploitation and falsification of documents. Sentencing will include restitution and probation. The state will open a broader investigation into Greenwood Haven." I didn't smile. I just exhaled, a breath that had waited months to escape. When the gavel struck, it sounded like thunder rolling through my bones. Outside, reporters asked for comments, but I ignored them. Helen walked beside me, carrying the case file under her arm. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "No, we did." As we reached the courthouse steps, Sophie waved from across the street. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time that day, catching on the glass of nearby buildings. I closed my eyes and felt the warmth on my face. Behind me, I heard Andrew call softly, "Mom." I turned. He looked lost, standing alone while Vanessa argued with their lawyer. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. "I know," I replied. "But you let it?" He nodded, and I walked away before either of us could say something we'd regret. That evening, I returned home to the quiet house that had once felt empty. Now it felt earned. The clock on the wall ticked steadily again. I replaced its old batteries and smiled at the sound. Justice didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace, a peace I'd built back, one truth at a time. A month after the hearing, the house felt different, lighter, somehow. The curtains I'd kept closed for years now fluttered with the breeze, and sunlight reached corners that had forgotten warmth. I spent my mornings tending to the flowers on the porch. The geraniums, the same kind John used to love, had started to bloom again, pink and stubborn. I liked that about them. They didn't apologize for surviving. Helen stopped by sometimes, bringing coffee and updates. Greenwood Haven was shut down. The state found dozens of cases like mine. Sophie joined a new advocacy group to protect seniors from fraud. They asked if I'd speak at a community meeting to share my story. I said yes, not because I wanted attention, but because silence had nearly destroyed me once. When I stood at that podium weeks later, looking at the sea of gray hair and hopeful eyes, I realized something. Justice isn't a single moment in court. It's every small decision to keep your head high when the world tries to make you invisible. Andrew called me a few times after sentencing. At first, I ignored him. Then one afternoon, he came by with his son, Eli, holding a paper bag of groceries. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood on the porch, eyes low. "Dad says hi," Eli said shyly. I smiled and took the bag. "Tell him I said thank you." Before they left, Andrew looked up. "I'm sorry, Mom." His voice cracked like something fragile. I nodded. "I know. But sorry isn't the same as changed." He didn't argue. He just nodded back, eyes wet. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but maybe the road to it. That evening, as I cleaned up, I noticed the clock on the wall had stopped again. I took it down, replaced the batteries, and set the hands to the right time. The tick returned, soft and steady. When I sat down at the kitchen table, I realized I wasn't lonely. Not really. I was still here, whole, awake, and unafraid. Justice, I thought, isn't revenge. It's simply remembering who you are and never letting anyone make you forget it again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.